You'll never be ready for this level of responsibility, Blake. Maybe in 5 years or so. Those words echoed in my head as I walked out of Regional VP Heather Marshall's office. I had just been denied the promotion I'd worked 80-hour weeks for over the past 3 years. The reason? I was too young at 26, not inexperienced, not unqualified, too young. 6 months later, I was sitting in that same office, but this time, it was my office. And I wasn't asking for a promotion anymore. I was the one people came to with those requests. This is the story of how I went from being dismissed for my age to becoming the youngest regional vice president in company history, all while watching my former boss scramble to keep her own job after the biggest mistake of her career. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Everyone told me I was lucky to land a job at Meridian Technologies right out of college. It was 2019, and the tech sector was competitive. Meridian was one of those companies with beanbag chairs in meeting rooms, cold brew on tap, and promises of work hard, play hard culture that supposedly made up for the entry-level salary. I'm Blake Turner, and I started in sales at Meridian's Boston office with all the enthusiasm of a fresh graduate with a business degree and student loans. Unlike many of my colleagues who treated the job as a stepping stone, I saw potential. Meridian was expanding its enterprise solutions division, and I recognized the opportunity it presented. My strategy was simple: learn everything, volunteer for everything, and outperform everyone. When other sales reps were heading out at 5 p.m., I was analyzing market trends and studying our competitors. When they complained about difficult clients, I requested them. The finance team needed help with a spreadsheet model at 11 p.m. on a Friday? I was there. Blake, you're going to burn out, my cubicle neighbor Josh warned me after finding me still at my desk when he returned from happy hour. This place isn't worth it. But I wasn't doing it for Meridian. I was doing it for me. Each challenge was a building block for my future, and it worked. By the end of my first year, I had the highest conversion rate in the division. By the end of my second, I was leading my own small team. My direct supervisor, Elaine Chen, recognized my potential. You've got something special, Blake. That rare combination of analytical thinking and people skills. Elaine became my mentor, teaching me the unwritten rules of corporate navigation. Under her guidance, I evolved from simply executing tasks to strategic thinking. When a client had an issue, I didn't just solve the immediate problem, I developed systems to prevent similar issues across our client base. You think like someone with 10 more years of experience, Elaine told me during a performance review. Keep this up, and you'll be running departments before you're 30. When Elaine left for a competitor in early 2021, she recommended me for her position. I was promoted to team lead at 24. It was a good step up, but I knew I was capable of more. My new boss was Heather Marshall, the Northeast Regional Vice President. Where Elaine had been supportive and strategic, Heather was political and territorial. She had been with Meridian for 15 years and had built her empire carefully. From our first meeting, I sensed her resistance to me. Congratulations on the promotion, Blake, she said, not looking up from her phone. Elaine certainly thought highly of you. Let's see if you live up to the hype. Despite her tepid welcome, I was determined to exceed expectations. My team consistently outperformed the other 5 teams in our region. When the company rolled out a new CRM system that confused most managers, I not only mastered it, but created training modules that were adopted company-wide. This is impressive work, said Tom Reynolds, the national sales director, after reviewing my quarterly numbers. We need more innovative thinking like this. Tom became an ally, occasionally pulling me into national strategy meetings where I was usually the youngest person by a decade. I soaked up everything in these meetings, not just the content but the dynamics, how decisions were made, where the real power lay, which battles were worth fighting. After one such meeting in late 2022, Tom pulled me aside. The Director of Northeast Operations position is opening up next quarter. Sandra's retiring. You should apply. The position reported directly to Heather and would be a significant promotion, 2 levels above my current role. It would put me on the fast track to executive leadership. Do you think I have a shot? I asked. It's a big jump. Honestly, your performance speaks for itself. You've initiated projects that have saved the company millions. Your team has the lowest turnover and highest satisfaction scores. The only thing working against you is your age. Is that really still a factor? In 2022, Tom shrugged. Shouldn't be, but this is still corporate America. Just make sure your application is flawless and your interview prep is comprehensive. I'll put in a good word. I spent the next month preparing. I analyzed every aspect of our Northeast operations, identifying inefficiencies and opportunities. I developed a 3-year strategic plan addressing our biggest challenges. I practiced interview questions until my responses were both polished and authentic. The day before my interview, I was reviewing my presentation when Josh stopped by my office. "Working late as usual?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Big interview tomorrow." "For Sandra's position? Blake, you know Heather's already decided to give it to Marcus, right?" Marcus Davis was a team lead like me, but had been with the company for 12 years. He was competent, but not exceptional. The kind who did just enough but never pushed boundaries. "That's not what I heard from Tom," I replied. Josh raised his eyebrows. "Look, I overheard Heather on the phone with HR last week. She said she wasn't comfortable with someone so junior overseeing operations of this scale. She specifically mentioned Marcus having the seasoned perspective they need." My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. "Thanks for the heads up, but I'm still going to give it my best shot." That night, I reworked my strategy. If age was going to be raised as an objection, I needed to preemptively address it. The next morning, I walked into the conference room where Heather and 2 HR representatives waited. I delivered my presentation flawlessly, focusing on my track record of results rather than years of experience. When I outlined my strategic plan, I could see genuine interest from the HR team. Then came the questions. "This is all very impressive, Blake," said Janet from HR. "But this role typically requires at least 10 years of experience. How would you address concerns about your readiness for this level of responsibility?" I was ready. I understand that perspective, but I'd argue that the quality and diversity of experience matters more than quantity. In 3 years, I've managed our highest-performing team, developed company-wide training programs, and implemented systems that have increased our regional efficiency by 22%. I've also worked closely with every department this role oversees, giving me practical insight into their operations. Janet nodded, seemingly satisfied. The other HR representative asked about my management philosophy, which I answered by highlighting specific examples of how I'd developed my team members and resolved conflicts. Throughout this, Heather remained mostly silent, occasionally making notes. When it was her turn to ask questions, she leaned forward. "All of this looks good on paper, Blake. But do you really think you have the life experience to handle crisis situations? What happens when you need to make difficult personnel decisions, affecting people with families, mortgages, decades of work history?" The question was designed to emphasize my youth as a weakness. I maintained eye contact as I responded. "I respect that those decisions carry weight. I've already had to make difficult calls, including recommending the termination of someone who'd been with the company for 20 years after discovering their repeated policy violations. What guided me wasn't my age, but my commitment to fairness and company values. I believe good leadership is about sound judgment and empathy, not just accumulated years. The interview concluded with standard questions about salary expectations and timeline. Despite Heather's obvious skepticism, I left. feeling cautiously optimistic. The HR team had seemed genuinely impressed. 2 weeks later, I was called into Heather's office. She didn't invite me to sit. "We've decided to go with Marcus for the operations director position," she said without preamble. "He has the experience and institutional knowledge we need." I kept my expression professional. "I understand. May I ask for specific feedback on my interview and application? For future opportunities." Heather sighed, as if my question was an inconvenience. "Your technical qualifications are solid, Blake. But leadership at this level requires a certain maturity. You'll never be ready for this level of responsibility at your age. Maybe in 5 years or so." There it was. Not about qualifications or performance, but explicitly about age. "Thank you for the feedback," I said evenly. "I appreciate your candor." That weekend, I reassessed my options. I could stay at Meridian and continue proving myself, knowing that Heather would likely block my advancement for years. I could look for opportunities at other companies, or I could try something else entirely. Monday morning, I had just settled at my desk when my phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Need to speak with you." My office, 10 a.m. Tom's office was on the executive floor, 15 stories above mine. When I arrived, his assistant immediately ushered me in. "Close the door," Tom said. Unlike his usually relaxed demeanor, he looked serious. "I heard about the operations director's decision. Heather told me it was unanimous, but HR tells a different story." I stayed silent, waiting. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Janet said you were clearly the most qualified candidate and that your age was explicitly used against you in the final decision. Heather told me I'd never be ready at my age, I confirmed. Tom shook his head. "That's not just bad leadership. It's potentially actionable. But I have a different proposition for you." He pushed a folder across his desk. Inside was an internal job posting I hadn't seen before. Special Projects Director, reporting directly to the CEO. "This is a new position," Tom explained. "Cross-functional, working on our biggest strategic initiatives. Same level as regional. VP, but focused on innovation rather than maintaining existing operations. The CEO created it after seeing your CRM training program and some of your other initiatives." I stared at the job description, which seemed tailored to my strengths. "Why? Are you showing me this before it's posted?" "Because Emily wants you to apply." Emily Chen was Meridian's CEO, someone I'd only seen from a distance at company-wide meetings. "The CEO knows who I am?" Tom laughed. "Blake, your reputation has spread. Your innovations have saved the company millions." Emily specifically asked about that young star in Northeast sales in our last executive committee meeting. My mind raced with possibilities. What about Heather? Wouldn't she block this too? This wouldn't be under Heather's purview. You'd be moving to corporate headquarters in Chicago, reporting directly to Emily. Heather won't have any say in the decision. It felt like the universe was offering a perfect solution, except for one detail. My life is here in Boston. My apartment, my friends. I know it's a big ask, Tom acknowledged. But this kind of opportunity rarely comes along, especially this early in someone's career. Think about it. The application deadline is Friday. After Tom's revelation, I spent the week researching Chicago, talking to friends who'd relocated for work, and trying to picture myself in this new role. By Thursday night, I had made my decision. I submitted my application minutes before the midnight deadline. The interview process was intense. 3 rounds with various executives, culminating in a one-on-one with Emily Chen herself. Unlike my interview with Heather, these conversations focused on ideas and vision rather than years of experience. In my final interview, Emily was refreshingly direct. Your ideas around customer journey mapping and predictive analytics are exactly what we need. But I want to be clear, This role will be challenging. You'll be working across departments with people who have decades more experience than you. Some will resist you simply because of your age. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Heather and the past year of subtle undermining. With all due respect, Ms. Chen, I've been dealing with that already. The difference is that here, it seems like innovation matters more than tenure. Emily smiled. Call me Emily. And yes, that's exactly right. Meridian needs to evolve, and we need people who aren't entrenched in how we've always done things. Your outsider perspective, combined with your impressive track record, is what caught my attention. 2 days later, I received the offer. The salary was nearly double what I was currently making, plus relocation assistance and a signing bonus. I accepted immediately. When I gave notice to Heather, her expression was one I'll never forget. A mixture of shock and something that looked almost like fear. Special Projects Director, reporting to Emily? She recovered quickly. Well, I suppose that role might be a better fit for someone at your level. I maintained my professionalism. I've appreciated the opportunities I've had here in Boston. It wasn't exactly a lie. I had appreciated them, just not the artificial ceiling Heather had tried to impose. News of my promotion spread quickly. Team members stopped by to congratulate me, and even Marcus looked uncomfortable when we passed in the hallway. My last day in Boston was a Friday. As I was packing my office, Tom called. Congratulations again. Before you head to Chicago, there's something you should know. He paused. The Northeast region has been underperforming for the past 2 quarters. Not your team, the overall region. Emily's been analyzing the numbers, and she's not happy with Heather's explanations. There's talk of restructuring. I processed this information. Why are you telling me this? Because your new role will include analyzing regional performance and recommending organizational changes. You'll be working with all the regional VPs, including Heather. The implications were clear. In my new position, I would have significant influence over Heather's future at Meridian. I'll evaluate all regions objectively, I assured him, though my heart was racing. I know you will, Tom said. That's why you got the job. My first month in Chicago was a whirlwind of new faces, systems, and challenges. I rented a sleek apartment in River North, walking distance to Meridian's glass and steel headquarters. The corporate floor was a different world from the Boston office, quieter, more polished, with stunning views of Lake Michigan. Emily had assembled a small but elite team for the Special Projects Division. I was the youngest by far, but nobody seemed to care. Here, ideas and execution were the currency, not years accumulated. My first major assignment came 3 weeks in, a comprehensive analysis of all regional operations with recommendations for structural improvements. It was exactly the kind of strategic work I loved, but I couldn't ignore the fact that Heather's region would be under my microscope. As I dove into the data, a troubling pattern emerged in the Northeast. While overall numbers had declined, my former team's performance had been manipulated in financial reports to look worse than it was, while Marcus's team was artificially inflated. Someone had been cooking the books, and all signs pointed to Heather. The question was, what would I do with this information? I stared at my computer screen, double-checking the numbers for the 5th time. There was no mistake. The financial reports for the Northeast region had been deliberately manipulated. Heather had been shifting performance metrics, making my former team look worse while inflating Marcus's results. In the corporate world, this wasn't just unethical, it was potentially career-ending. I closed my laptop and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Chicago office. The city sprawled before me, lights flickering on as dusk settled over Lake Michigan. 3 months ago, I was fighting for recognition in Boston. Now I held evidence that could destroy the person who had held me back. The question wasn't just what I would do with this information, but who I would become in making that decision. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Progress on regional analysis? Need preliminary findings for board meeting Friday? I texted back. Uncovered some concerning discrepancies in Northeast data. Need to discuss privately. Her response was immediate. Tomorrow, 7 a.m., my office. Sleep eluded me that night. I kept thinking about Heather's dismissive words. You'll never be ready for this level of responsibility. Was this my chance to prove her wrong or to prove her right? Would pursuing this be professional integrity or personal vendetta? Emily's corner office made mine look like a closet. Chicago's skyline was just catching the first rays of sunlight when I arrived, file folder in hand. She was already at her desk, hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. What have you found? I laid out the evidence methodically. Spreadsheets, performance reports, the inconsistencies that couldn't be explained by normal market fluctuations. The numbers have been deliberately altered to make certain teams look better than others. This has been happening for at least the past 3 quarters. Emily studied the documents, her expression unreadable. And you're certain about this? I've verified the raw data against the published reports. There's no other explanation. She closed the folder. Who knows about this besides us? No one. I wanted to bring it directly to you first. Emily nodded, seemingly satisfied with my discretion. Blake, what you've uncovered isn't just about Heather. If the board sees that a regional VP has been falsifying reports for 3 quarters without anyone catching it, they'll question our entire financial oversight system. I hadn't considered these broader implications. This wasn't just about one person's misconduct. It potentially undermined confidence in Meridian's leadership. What do you want me to do? I asked. For now, nothing. Continue your regional analysis as planned, but keep these findings separate. I'll handle Heather personally. She fixed me with an intense gaze. This conversation stays between us. Understood? I nodded, feeling both relief and concern. While I was glad Emily was taking this seriously, her instruction to keep quiet left me uneasy. Was she protecting the company or protecting Heather? The next week passed in tense productivity. I focused on the other regions, finding legitimate inefficiencies but nothing like the deliberate manipulation I'd uncovered in the Northeast, all while wondering what Emily planned to do. My answer came on Friday afternoon. An all-staff email announced an emergency leadership call Monday morning. No agenda was provided. Saturday night, my phone rang. An unknown Boston number. Blake? It's Marcus Davis. The last person I expected to hear from. Marcus? How did you get my number? That doesn't matter. Have you heard about Heather? I was tense. What about her? She's been put on administrative leave. Security escorted her out yesterday. No one knows why, but there are auditors crawling all over our financial reports. So Emily had acted, and quickly. I hadn't heard, I said carefully. There's more, Marcus continued, his voice dropping. They're sending someone from corporate to oversee the region until they determine what's happening. People are saying it. Might be you. I genuinely hadn't heard this part. That's news to me. Yeah, well, just a heads up. There are mixed feelings here. Some people are worried you'll come back with an axe to grind after how Heather treated you. The call left me troubled. If Emily was planning to send me back to Boston, even temporarily, why hadn't she discussed it with me first? Monday mornings. Call answered that question. Emily herself conducted the meeting, addressing the elephant in the room immediately. As some of you may have heard, Heather Marshall has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. I want to be transparent. We've discovered financial irregularities in the Northeast region's reporting. Until this matter is resolved, we need interim leadership in Boston. My phone pinged with a meeting request from Emily immediately after this call. Blake Turner will be temporarily overseeing Northeast operations while maintaining his special projects responsibilities. The announcement sent a ripple through the video call. I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. This wasn't what I had signed up for. After the call ended, I headed straight to Emily's office. "You didn't think this was something we should have discussed first?" I asked, trying to keep the edge from my voice. "I made an executive decision," Emily replied calmly. "You know the Northeast better than anyone else at your level, and frankly, I need someone I can trust. The optics aren't great. People will think I orchestrated this to get revenge on Heather." Emily leaned forward. "Blake, I don't care about optics right now. I care about stabilizing a region that's been compromised by someone I trusted for 15 years. This isn't about your history with Heather. It's about your capabilities." Her vote of confidence was flattering, but the situation still felt messy. "How long are we talking about?" 4 weeks, maybe 6, just until we complete the audit and can make permanent decisions." She softened slightly. "I know this isn't ideal. Timing with your relocation still in progress, but I wouldn't ask if I had better options. I knew when to pick my battles. I'll need full authority while I'm there. No ambiguity about who's in charge. You'll have it. Regional VP authority, effective immediately. Your official title will be Interim Regional Vice President." And just like that, I had become exactly what Heather said I'd never be. At least, temporarily. The return to Boston was surreal. Same office building, different floor. Heather's corner office, now my corner office, had been stripped of personal items, leaving only corporate furniture and empty walls. My first day back consisted mainly of closed-door meetings with the audit team, HR, and legal counsel. The picture they painted was worse than I'd initially discovered. Heather hadn't just manipulated performance metrics. She'd been inflating regional results to secure her bonuses for years. The recent decline had made it harder to hide. "Will there be criminal charges?" I asked the head of legal. "That depends on whether the board wants to make this public. Right now, we're focused on damage control." By day's end, my head was spinning with the scope of the mess I'd inherited. I was about to leave when Josh appeared at my door. "So the prodigal son returns as the new ruler," he said, leaning against the doorframe just as he had so many times before. But now there was an edge to his voice. "It's temporary," I clarified. "Just until things stabilize." "Sure." His skepticism was obvious. "Must feel good though, right? Taking her to the office after she blocked your promotion?" I met his gaze steadily. "Nothing about this situation feels good, Josh. Heather made serious mistakes that hurt the company and everyone in this region, including you." He studied me for a moment. "Some people are saying you set her up somehow." "Those people are wrong. The audit team has been through everything. The evidence speaks for itself." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I believe you. You're ambitious, not vindictive." He straightened. "Anyway, welcome back, boss." The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting for the Northeast team. Standing before them, many familiar faces now looking at me with uncertainty, I felt the weight of my new position. "I know this transition has been abrupt," I began. "And I understand there are concerns and rumors, so let me be clear. I'm not here to clean house or settle scores. I'm here because our region is in trouble, and we need to right the ship." I displayed a slide showing our actual performance metrics, the unmanipulated numbers, for the first time. The room grew tense as people realized how different they were from what Heather had been reporting. "This is where we really stand. Not where we want to be, but not a disaster either. The good news is that now we can work with accurate information. No more smoke and mirrors." I outlined my 30-day plan to stabilize operations, emphasizing transparency and accountability. "Every week, I'll share exactly where we stand. No surprises, no hidden agendas." After the meeting, several team leads approached me, including Marcus. He looked uncomfortable but determined. "I want you to know I had no idea about the financial manipulation," he said. "I thought my team was genuinely outperforming targets." Believed him. Marcus had always been by the book, if not particularly innovative. I know. The audit showed Heather acted alone. I'd like to stay on, he continued. I know things were awkward after that promotion, but I respect what you've accomplished. His humility surprised me. I appreciate that, Marcus. Your experience is valuable, and I'm counting on it during this transition. The next 4 weeks tested every leadership skill I possessed. I divided my time between Boston and Chicago, working virtually around the clock. The regional team, initially wary, gradually responded to my transparent approach. When metrics improved even slightly, we celebrated together. When we faced setbacks, I took responsibility rather than blaming individuals. By week 3, something unexpected was happening. The team wasn't just stabilizing, they were innovating. People who had kept their heads down under Heather's leadership were suddenly offering ideas. Junior staff were speaking up in meetings. I've never seen engagement like this, Alicia from HR remarked after a particularly productive session. It's like people finally feel safe to contribute. I'd instituted an anonymous suggestion system, promising to implement at least 3 ideas each month. The first one we adopted, a cross-functional client service approach proposed by a customer service rep, resulted in immediately improved satisfaction scores. In my weekly calls with Emily, I reported not just on financial recovery, but on this cultural shift. You've turned a crisis into an opportunity, she observed during our 4th update. The board is impressive. It's the team, I insisted. They just needed the right environment. No false modesty, Blake. This is leadership in action. She paused. Which brings me to our next steps. Your interim position was supposed to end next week. I'd like to extend it. I hesitated. While the role was challenging and rewarding, I'd been living out of a suitcase, commuting between 2 cities. For how long? Permanently. I nearly dropped my phone. You want me to stay in Boston? What about special projects? Let me clarify. I want you to become the permanent Northeast Regional Vice President, but continue leading special projects initiative rollouts across all regions. It's unconventional, but so are you. It was a stunning offer. At 26, I would become the youngest regional VP in company history. But something didn't feel right. So I'd be reporting to you for special projects and to the COO for regional operations? It sounded like a recipe for competing priorities and burnout. No, you'd report directly to me for everything. We're restructuring the leadership model. Regional VPs will now report to the CEO instead of the COO. My mind raced. This wasn't just a promotion. It was a fundamental organizational change. That's a lot of direct reports for you. Emily chuckled. I can handle it. The real question is, can you handle this dual role? It won't be easy. I thought about the past month, the challenges, the late nights, but also the sense of purpose I'd found in rebuilding the region. I want to, but I need to make sure it's sustainable. Let's discuss details in person. Fly back to Chicago this weekend. That Friday night, I packed up Heather's former office, soon to be officially mine. As I was placing my few personal items on the desk, my phone rang. Unknown number. Blake Turner speaking. Blake, it's Heather Marshall. My blood ran cold. I hadn't heard from her since the investigation began. Heather, I didn't expect to hear from you. I'm sure you didn't. Her voice was tight but controlled. I've been following the company announcements. Congratulations on the permanent appointment. You managed to get everything you wanted. That's not how I see it. No? You find evidence against me, I get forced out, and you take my position. Seems pretty straightforward. I chose my next words carefully. I didn't set out to find evidence against you, Heather. I was doing my job analyzing regional performance. The manipulation was extensive and impossible to miss. She laughed bitterly. So noble. Does it matter that I built that region from nothing? That I gave 15 years to Meridian while you were still in grade school? Of course that matters. Your contributions aren't erased, but you crossed a line. A line that everyone walks up to. Do you think Emily hasn't massaged numbers to impress the board? That any executive survives without occasionally reframing reality? Her cynicism disturbed me. If that's true, then the system needs to change. Ah, the idealism of youth, she said mockingly. You'll learn. In fact, I'm calling to give you your first lesson. Something in her tone made me uneasy. What does that mean? Check your email in about an hour. I sent something interesting to the board and several journalists. Consider it my parting gift to Meridian. She hung up before I could respond. Exactly 1 hour later, my phone exploded with notifications. Emily, the legal team, PR, all trying to reach me simultaneously. Heather had sent internal communications suggesting I had orchestrated her downfall as revenge for the denied promotion. She'd twisted innocent conversations and meetings into something that looked like a calculated scheme. Most damning was an email exchange between Heather and me from months ago where I had questioned her reporting methods. Out of context, it looked like I was probing for weaknesses to exploit rather than seeking clarification. I called Emily immediately. I've seen it, she said before I could speak. It's a desperate play by someone with nothing to lose. But it could work, I pointed out. The timeline fits her narrative. I got denied a promotion, then moved to corporate, then exposed her misconduct, and now have her job. Blake, listen to me. Emily's voice was firm. We have forensic accounting, evidence. Her manipulations predated your promotion request by years. This is a distraction tactic. What does the board think? They're concerned about the optics, naturally, but they've seen the audit results. She sighed. This does complicate the timing of announcing your permanent appointment. My heart sank. After everything, Heather might still manage to block my advancement. So we delay? No. We accelerate. We announce your appointment Monday morning, along with the completion of the audit and a summary of findings. We control the narrative by being transparent about everything, including how the issues were discovered. It was a bold strategy. Won't that just add fuel to Heather's claims that I orchestrated this? Not if we frame it correctly. This isn't about you versus Heather. It's about corporate responsibility and integrity. You found discrepancies and reported them through proper channels. I made the decisions about the investigation and your appointment based on merit. Period. I wasn't entirely convinced. And if journalists pick up her story? We have nothing to hide. You'll give interviews if necessary, alongside me. We stand united and transparent. The weekend passed in a blur of emergency meetings and PR strategy sessions. By Sunday night, we had a comprehensive communications plan. Monday morning, Emily and I would hold a press conference announcing my appointment and addressing Heather's allegations head-on. That night, as I packed to return to Chicago, I found myself reflecting on how far I'd come. 6 months ago, I'd walked out of Heather's office devastated by her dismissal of my potential. Now, I was about to be officially named her successor, weathering her final attempt to derail my career. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to hold me back because I was too young, Heather had ultimately accelerated my rise. Her resistance had forced me to find alternative paths, to prove myself in ways I might never have attempted otherwise. As my flight took off from Boston, I gazed down at the city lights below. Whatever happened tomorrow, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready for this level of responsibility. I'd always been ready. Sometimes it just takes someone trying to block your path to discover you're capable of clearing hurdles you never imagined you could jump. My phone pinged with a text from Emily. Ready for tomorrow? I replied. More than ready. The Chicago skyline glittered in the early morning light as my Uber approached Meridian headquarters. Camera crews were already setting up in the plaza. more media attention than I'd anticipated. Heather's accusations had apparently struck a chord in the business community. Nervous? Asked Diane, Meridian's veteran PR director, who met me at a side entrance to avoid the press. Focused, I corrected, though my knotted stomach suggested otherwise. She led me through a series of back hallways to a conference room where Emily and the executive team were reviewing talking points. Emily looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. Blake. Good morning. She gestured to an empty chair beside her. We were just discussing a development. What kind of development? I asked, noting the tension in the room. Meridian's legal counsel, Arthur Wright, slid a tablet across the table. On screen was an email from Heather to several financial news outlets. It contained screenshots of text messages, conversations between Heather and Marcus from months ago. Blake is gunning for my job. Kid's smart but dangerous. Keeps asking about our financial reporting. Need to keep him contained. My stomach dropped. These are taken completely out of context. We know, Emily assured me, but context doesn't make for splashy headlines. Arthur leaned forward. Ms. Marshall is clearly attempting to create a narrative where she was targeted by an ambitious subordinate rather than caught falsifying financial records. The question is how we respond. The fact that she's resorting to this suggests she knows the audit findings are irrefutable, I pointed out. She's trying to shift attention from her actions to my supposed motivations. Emily nodded. Exactly, which is why we're adjusting our approach for this morning's announcement. She outlined the new strategy. Instead of me standing alongside her at the press conference, I would be introduced after she had already presented the audit findings. This would establish the facts before my appointment was announced, making it clear that Heather's removal and my promotion were consequences of her actions, not the other way around. Your role is straightforward, Emily concluded. Be professional, not defensive. Acknowledge your history with Heather without apology. Focus on your vision for the region moving forward. As the team dispersed to make final preparations, Emily held me back. One more thing, she said when we were alone. The board has requested a meeting with you after the press conference. Is my appointment in jeopardy? I asked bluntly. No, but they want assurances that there won't be more surprises. Her expression softened slightly. They're not questioning your capabilities, Blake. They're concerned about optics. And what do you think? I think Heather underestimated you, twice. First, by dismissing you for your age, and now by assuming you can't handle this situation with maturity. She checked her watch. It's time. Ready? I straightened my tie. Ready. The press conference began at 9 a.m. sharp. From the side room where I waited, I watched on a monitor as Emily took the podium with the composed authority that had made her a respected CEO. Her statement was concise but comprehensive, detailing the financial irregularities discovered in the Northeast region and the subsequent audit. The investigation revealed a pattern of deliberate manipulation dating back 3 years, she explained. This manipulation was perpetrated by a single executive who has since been terminated. Meridian Technologies is committed to financial transparency and corporate integrity, which is why we're sharing these findings today. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal raised his hand. Are you referring to Heather Marshall? And how do you respond to her allegations that she was targeted by a junior employee with a grudge? Emily's expression remained impassive. Yes, the executive in question is Heather Marshall. As for her allegations, they are categorically false. The discrepancies were discovered during a routine analysis conducted by our Special Projects Division, which examines all regions equally. The findings were then verified by an independent audit team. And what about Blake Turner? Called another reporter. Is it true that Ms. Marshall had previously denied him a promotion, citing his age as a factor? I'll address that momentarily, Emily replied. First, I want to be clear about the timeline. The audit findings were established before any personnel decisions were made. Now, regarding leadership in the Northeast region, this was my cue. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the door and approached the podium as Emily introduced me. Blake Turner has been serving as interim regional vice president for the past month, stabilizing operations and implementing new transparency measures. Today, I'm pleased to announce his permanent appointment to this position. Camera flashes erupted as I took my place beside Emily. The same reporter followed up immediately. "Mr. Turner, did you target Ms. Marshall because she blocked your promotion?" I met his gaze directly. No. When I joined the Special Projects Division, I was tasked with analyzing operational efficiency across all regions. The financial discrepancies in the Northeast were impossible to miss. I reported what I found through proper channels, as any responsible employee would. "But you benefited from her downfall," the reporter pressed. "I was asked to step into a challenging situation because of my familiarity with the region and my demonstrated capabilities," I responded. "Whether that benefits my career is secondary to what benefits the company and our clients." A woman from Bloomberg raised her hand. "You're 26 years old. That's unusually young for this level of executive leadership. How do you respond to concerns about your experience?" It was the question I'd been anticipating. I believe effectiveness as a leader is measured by results, not years. In my time at Meridian, I've consistently delivered those results, increasing team performance, developing innovative solutions, and now helping to restore integrity to our regional operations. Age can bring wisdom, certainly, but so can fresh perspective and adaptability. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, growing increasingly technical about the audit findings rather than personal. By the time Emily closed the session, the narrative had shifted perceptibly from scandal to corporate governance. As we exited, Emily murmured, "Well handled. The board is waiting in the executive conference room." The board meeting was less confrontational than I'd feared. The 12 members, mostly industry veterans with decades of experience, asked pointed questions about my leadership approach and vision for the Northeast region. I outlined my 90-day plan, emphasizing both stability and innovation. The board chair, Patricia Winters, regarded me thoughtfully after my presentation. "Mr. Turner, your credentials are impressive, as is your handling of this delicate situation. But I have one remaining concern." "Yes, Ms. Winters?" "Heather Marshall was with Meridian for 15 years before this incident. She was considered a model executive. What steps will you take to ensure you don't find yourself in a similar position down the line?" The question caught me off guard. It wasn't about my youth or the controversy, it was about the seduction of power itself. "I believe the first safeguard is transparency," I answered after a moment's reflection. Heather operated in isolation, guarding information even from her own team. I've already implemented weekly performance reviews where all metrics are visible to the entire regional team. I continued, gaining confidence. The second is accountability. I've established an anonymous feedback system where anyone can question decisions or raise concerns without fear of retaliation. And third, I believe in the distribution of responsibility. No single person, including me, should have unchecked control over reporting. Patricia nodded slowly. "Those are sound principles. Mr. Turner, I hope you'll maintain them even when they become inconvenient." Because they will. The meeting concluded with unanimous board approval of my appointment. As I left the conference room, the weight of the past weeks began to lift. The crisis wasn't over. There would be more media scrutiny, questions from clients, team members to reassure, but the path forward was clear. Emily caught up with me in the hallway. "Congratulations, Regional VP Turner," the board was impressed. "Thank you for your support through all this. You earned it." She checked her watch. "You should head home and get some rest. Tomorrow will be busy." "Actually, there's something I need to do first." An hour later, I sat in a coffee shop across from Marcus Davis. He looked exhausted, his usual crisp appearance rumpled from stress. "I appreciate you meeting me," I said after we'd ordered. "I wanted to talk to you directly about those text messages Heather released." He winced. Blake, I can explain. I held up a hand. You don't need to. Those messages were from months ago, when you were aligned with your boss. I understand loyalty. It wasn't just loyalty, he admitted. It was fear. Heather had a way of making you feel that crossing her meant career suicide. I know, but that culture ends now. I leaned forward. Marcus, you're a valuable member of the team. You have experience and institutional knowledge that we need. What happened with Heather doesn't have to define your future at Meridian. His expression shifted from apprehension to cautious hope. You're not pushing me out? Just the opposite. I'd like you to lead our client retention initiative. Your relationships with long-term accounts are unmatched, and we need that stability right now. Relief washed over his face. I don't know what to say. Say you'll give the new leadership structure a chance. That's all I ask. By the time I returned to my Chicago apartment that evening, social media was buzzing with hot takes on the Meridian management shakeup. Most coverage was surprisingly balanced, focusing on the audit findings rather than Heather's accusations. A few business commentators had even picked up on the age angle, debating whether companies were overlooking young talent by adhering to traditional career timelines. I was drafting emails to the Northeast team when my phone rang. Unknown number. Blake Turner. Mr. Turner, this is Regina Sims from the Wall Street Journal. I'm working on a follow-up piece about today's announcements. My guard went up immediately. Ms. Sims, all media inquiries should go through our PR department. I understand protocol, but I thought you might want to comment on an interview I just concluded with Heather Marshall. My pulse quickened. What kind of interview? She provided documentation suggesting the financial irregularities were actually approved accounting practices that you misrepresented to advance your career. This was a new level of desperation from Heather. That claim is demonstrably false, as our audit findings showed. She also alleges that you approached her with a deal. If she recommended you for the operations director position, you wouldn't report certain creative accounting practices you'd noticed. That's absurd, I said, my voice sharper than intended. Ms. Sims, I understand you're doing your job, but publishing these allegations without verification would be irresponsible journalism. So, you deny these claims? Categorically. And I suggest you speak with our audit team and legal counsel before printing anything based solely on Ms. Marshall's assertions. After hanging up, I immediately called Emily to warn her about this new development. Her response was unexpectedly calm. We anticipated something like this. Don't worry, legal is already preparing a response, and I've spoken with several board members who have connections at the Journal. This is just noise, Blake. But if they publish these allegations, then we respond with facts. Remember, Heather is fighting for her professional reputation. She's going to throw everything she can at us. Our job is to stay focused on rebuilding the region, not getting dragged into a mudslinging contest. Her composure steadied me. You're right. I need to focus on the team, not Heather. Exactly. By the way, I heard about your meeting with Marcus. That was good leadership. Extending an olive branch instead of cleaning the house? He deserves a second chance. Most of the team does. That kind of judgment is why you're in this position. She paused. Now go get some sleep. Northeast Regional. Call tomorrow at 8 a.m. You're first as the official VP. The next morning, I faced my team with renewed confidence. The video conference included all 86 Northeast staff members, many of whom I'd worked with for years. Despite the early hour, attendance was 100%. Good morning, everyone. As you've likely heard, my interim position has become permanent. I want to be transparent about what this means for our region and each of you. I outlined my vision for the next quarter, the changes we'd implement, the challenges we faced, and the opportunities ahead. I acknowledged the uncertainty of the past month without dwelling on Heather or the investigation. I know many of you are concerned about job security. Let me be clear. This transition is not about cutting staff or punishing anyone associated with previous leadership. It's about building a stronger, more transparent organization where everyone can contribute and advance based on merit, not politics or tenure. The questions that followed were pointed but respectful. People wanted specifics: how performance would be measured, whether reporting structures would change, if cross-functional initiatives would continue. I answered each directly, promising only what I knew I could deliver. By the call's end, the team's apprehension had noticeably diminished. Not gone, that would take time and consistent leadership, but the crisis atmosphere was lifting. Over the following weeks, I split my time between Boston and Chicago, gradually transitioning more responsibility to my new leadership team in the Northeast while maintaining oversight of special projects. The dual role was demanding but exhilarating, exactly the kind of challenge I'd always wanted. The Wall Street Journal published a balanced piece that included Heather's allegations, but also the audit findings and statements from Meridian's legal team. The story faded quickly as more substantive business news took prominence. By month's end, even the industry blogs had moved on to other corporate dramas. Heather eventually accepted a settlement agreement that included a non-disclosure clause. I never spoke with her again, though occasionally I'd hear her name mentioned in industry circles, always with a hint of caution. 6 months after my appointment, I hosted a regional leadership retreat at a resort outside Boston. The Northeast was now Meridian's top-performing region, having exceeded quarterly targets by 17%. The culture had transformed from one of fear and secrecy to collaborative innovation. On the retreat's final evening, I found myself on the resort's terrace with Josh, now my director of sales operations, a promotion he'd earned through exceptional performance. "Remember when you told me I'd burn out if I kept working those long hours?" I asked, gesturing with my glass. He laughed. "In my defense, I didn't know you were on a mission." Neither did I, really. I just knew I had more to offer than what was being asked of me. "Well, mission accomplished, I'd say." He glanced at me. "Though I'm guessing you already have the next one planned." I smiled. "Maybe. Emily mentioned expanding our European operations next year. They need someone who can replicate what we've done here." International VP before 30? Why am I not surprised? We stood in companionable silence, watching the sunset. 6 months. Earlier, I'd walked out of Heather's office stinging from her dismissal. "You'll never be ready for this level of responsibility." Those words that had once wounded me now seemed almost like a gift, the spark that had ignited my determination to prove exactly what I was capable of. In trying to limit me with an arbitrary timeline based on age, Heather had inadvertently accelerated my journey. Sometimes the people who underestimate you become the unwitting catalysts for your greatest achievements. The next morning, as I addressed the leadership team one final time before we returned to our respective offices, I shared the philosophy that had emerged from this experience. Your readiness for opportunity is defined by your capabilities, not your calendar. Never let someone else's timeline determine your potential. The moment you're told you're not ready is often precisely when you need to demonstrate that you are. As the room erupted in applause, I caught Josh's knowing smile across the table. He raised his coffee cup in a silent toast, a gesture that acknowledged not just how far I'd come, but how that journey had transformed everyone around me as well. The regional VP title on my office door was just the beginning. The real achievement was creating a culture where the next generation of leaders would never hear the words, "You're too young," as anything other than a challenge to prove otherwise. 1 year into my tenure as regional VP, Meridian Technologies had transformed. The Northeast region hadn't just recovered from Heather's mismanagement. We were setting new benchmarks for the entire company. Our transparent approach to metrics, collaborative decision-making, and emphasis on innovation regardless of seniority had created a culture, other regions were scrambling to emulate. I sat in the monthly executive committee meeting, listening, as other regional VPs questioned Emily about implementing our success model in their territories. At 27, I was still the youngest person at the table by at least a decade, but the initial skepticism had given way to grudging respect and eventually genuine collaboration. The success in the Northeast isn't just about metrics, Emily was explaining. It's about the fundamental organizational philosophy Blake has implemented. Perhaps he should elaborate. All eyes turned to me. I leaned forward, conscious of the opportunity to influence company-wide policy. What's working for us isn't complicated, but it requires letting go of some traditional corporate hierarchies, I began. We've flattened the decision-making process, created cross-functional teams instead of siloed departments, and implemented a system where ideas are evaluated on merit rather than on who proposed them. Craig Wilson, the Midwest Regional VP and the most traditionally minded of my peers, frowned. That sounds great in theory, Blake, but my region has established processes that have worked for decades. Disrupting them could destabilize our operations. Respectfully, Craig, our established processes across the company were precisely what allowed Heather's manipulation to go undetected for years, I countered. Transparency isn't just about preventing misconduct. It unleashes potential that hierarchical structures tend to suppress. The room fell silent at the mention of Heather. Though a year had passed, her name still carried weight, a cautionary tale of how even respected executives could fall. Emily broke the tension. Blake makes a valid point, which brings me to our next agenda item. She distributed tablets with a presentation loaded. The board has approved a company-wide restructuring initiative. We're calling it Project Renaissance. The presentation outlined a bold vision, reorganizing Meridian's entire operational model using the Northeast region as a template. Cross-functional teams, flattened hierarchies, transparent metrics, all implemented across every region and department. This is substantial, said Lisa Reyes, the West Coast Regional VP. What's the timeline? 18 months for full implementation, Emily replied. And Blake will be leading the transition. My head snapped up. This was the first I'd heard of this assignment. Leading? I echoed. Emily nodded. As Executive Vice, President of Organizational Transformation, a new position, reporting directly to me. The room erupted in questions. Through the commotion, I caught Emily's eye. She gave me a slight nod. We'd discussed this privately. After the meeting, I followed her to her office. You might have given me some warning, I said as she closed the door. And let you prepare a list of reasons to decline? She smiled. I know. You, Blake, you'd overthink it. It's a massive undertaking. Restructuring the entire company, the resistance will be significant. Precisely why we need someone who isn't wedded to the old ways. Someone with proven results and the courage to challenge established norms. She gestured for me to sit. You transformed the Northeast while simultaneously running special projects. The board has taken notice. I processed the magnitude of what she was proposing. What about my current responsibilities? The Northeast region still needs leadership. You'll appoint your successor. My only stipulation is that you consider diverse candidates, not just in terms of demographics, but thinking, styles, experience levels, backgrounds. The opportunity was extraordinary, a chance to reshape Meridian from the inside out, implementing the principles I believed in across the entire organization. Yet the prospect of leaving the region I'd rebuilt was unexpectedly painful. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Emily nodded. You have 48 hours. The announcement goes out Friday. I left headquarters early, driving aimlessly through Chicago's downtown streets as I weighed the opportunity. Eventually, I found myself at Lakefront Trail, watching runners and cyclists navigate the path along Lake Michigan. My phone rang. Josh calling from Boston. How was the executive meeting? He asked. Did they approve the new client engagement model? I hesitated. Josh had become one of my most trusted colleagues, but Emily's offer was still confidential. The model was approved, but something else came up. Something good or something concerning? Potentially both. I can't discuss it yet, but I may need your help making a difficult decision. Intriguing. Drinks when you're back in Boston? Definitely. After we hung up, I continued walking along the shoreline, remembering how just 18 months ago, I'd been devastated by Heather's rejection. Now I was being offered a position that hadn't even existed before, created specifically for me, with company-wide influence. The irony wasn't lost on me. Heather's attempt to limit me had ultimately launched me beyond anything she could have imagined. Had she simply given me that initial promotion, I might still be happily running operations in the Northeast, with no ambitions beyond regional leadership. By the time I returned to my apartment, my decision was made. The next morning, I requested meetings with 3 key members of my leadership team: Marcus Davis, now thriving as Client Relations Director; Alicia Thompson, our innovative HR lead who had helped design our transparent evaluation systems; and Josh, who had transformed our sales approach. I met with each separately, discussing their visions for the region and their career aspirations without revealing my potential departure. Their insights would inform what I was about to propose to Emily. At 5 p.m., I sent her my response. I would accept the EVP position with 2 conditions. First, that I could implement a co-leadership model in the Northeast rather than appointing a single successor. Second, that my new role would include authority to reimagine Meridian's talent development approach, not just its operational structure. Her reply came within minutes. Both conditions were accepted. Announcement tomorrow at 10 a.m. Prepare remarks. That night, I drafted what would become Meridian's new leadership philosophy. The cornerstone was a concept I called distributed expertise, recognizing that no single leader possessed all the IT knowledge or skills needed to navigate modern business challenges. Instead, leadership should flow to those most qualified for specific decisions, regardless of title or tenure. The next morning, I stood beside Emily as she announced my appointment to the company via video conference. Watching the reaction stream, in from offices across the country, surprise, curiosity, and more than a few concerned frowns, I understood the magnitude of the challenge ahead. After outlining Project Renaissance's objectives, Emily introduced me as its architect and leader. Blake will be transitioning to this new role over the next month. During that time, he'll be identifying his leadership team and selecting his successors in the Northeast region. When it was my turn to speak, I focused on opportunity rather than disruption. Change can be uncomfortable, I acknowledged. But the business landscape is evolving faster than ever. Companies that cling to hierarchies and siloed thinking aren't just risking stagnation, they're ensuring it. Project Renaissance isn't about dismantling what works. It's about amplifying our strengths through transparency, collaboration, and recognition of talent wherever it exists in our organization. The Q&A that followed revealed the spectrum of reactions I'd anticipated: enthusiasm from younger employees, cautious interest from middle management, and thinly veiled resistance from some long-tenured executives. Craig from Midwest Operations was particularly direct. This sounds like we're prioritizing youth and novelty over experience and proven methodologies. Not at all, I countered. We're prioritizing results over tenure and innovation over tradition, regardless of age. Some of our most creative ideas in the Northeast came from team members who've been with Meridian for 20-plus years. The difference was creating an environment where they felt empowered to share those ideas. After the announcement, my inbox flooded with congratulations, questions, and meeting requests. Among them was a message from Tom Reynolds, the national sales director who had first alerted me to the operations director opening that Heather had blocked me from. His subject line: full circle. Blake, when I suggested you apply for that operations position 2 years ago, I knew you were ready for more responsibility. What I couldn't have predicted was how Heather's short-sightedness would catapult you to where you are now. Sometimes the roadblocks we face turn out to be launching pads. Congratulations on the EVP role. Meridian needs this transformation, and you're the right person to lead it. Tom, his message crystallized what I'd been feeling, that sometimes rejection is redirection to something better than we had initially envisioned for ourselves. The month of transition was the most demanding of my career. I alternated between Boston and Chicago, assembling my transformation team while preparing the Northeast for its new leadership structure. After extensive interviews and performance analysis, I made my decision. Rather than appointing a single successor, I created a 3-person executive council. Marcus would oversee client relationships and retention. Alicia would manage talent, development, and regional operations, and Josh would lead sales strategy and growth initiatives. Each brought complementary strengths, and together they represented a blend of experience levels, backgrounds, and perspectives. When I presented the model to Emily, she raised an eyebrow. A leadership triad? That's unconventional. So I was. Appointing a 26-year-old regional VP, I reminded her. This structure embodies the distributed expertise approach we're implementing company-wide. Why not start with leadership itself? She studied the proposal. The board will have questions. I have answers. The data from our cross-functional teams in the Northeast shows clearly that diverse leadership perspectives lead to better outcomes. This isn't about dividing power, it's about multiplying it. After careful consideration, Emily approved the model, with the caveat that Marcus would serve as primary liaison to corporate for streamlined communication. My final week in Boston was bittersweet. I'd accepted that my new role would be based in Chicago permanently, requiring me to say goodbye to the city and team that had shaped my career. The Northeast staff organized a farewell gathering at a downtown restaurant, where memories and achievements from the past year were shared. Josh raised his glass for a toast. To Blake, who taught us that leadership isn't about age or title, it's about vision, integrity, and having the courage to challenge the way things have always been done. As I looked around at the team we'd built, confident, collaborative, innovative, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just about my journey anymore. It was about creating a system where everyone could advance based on merit rather than arbitrary factors like age or tenure. My first official day as Executive Vice President of Organizational Transformation began with a National Leadership Summit in Chicago. Regional directors, department heads, and key influencers from every level of the company gathered to hear the vision for Project Renaissance. Standing before this diverse group, some eager, some skeptical, all instrumental to our success, I reflected on how far I'd come since that rejection in Heather's office. 18 months ago, I was told I wasn't ready for leadership because of my age. I began, immediately capturing the room's attention. Today, I'm not standing before you because I somehow became ready by growing older. I'm here because Meridian is evolving to recognize that readiness isn't measured in years. It's demonstrated through results, innovation, and the ability to inspire others. I outlined the 3 phases of our transformation: assessment, redesign, and implementation. Each region would undergo an extensive evaluation, identifying strengths to amplify and inefficiencies to address. Cross-functional teams would then develop tailored solutions, followed by phased implementation with continuous feedback loops. This isn't a top-down mandate, I emphasized. It's a collaborative reimagining of how we work together. Every voice matters in this process, especially those closest to our clients and day-to-day operations. After my presentation, Craig approached me. His earlier resistance had been representative of the old guard's concerns. "I've been with Meridian for 22 years, he said, his expression serious. "I've seen reorganizations come and go, usually driven by consultants who don't understand our business." I waited, expecting more resistance. "But this is different," he continued, surprising me. You've lived our challenges. You've proven your approach works. I still have reservations about some aspects, but I'm willing to give this an honest chance. His support, however tentative, was significant. If Craig could be convinced, others would follow. As the summit progressed over 3 days, initial skepticism gradually shifted toward cautious optimism. We created working groups with representatives from every region and department, ensuring diverse perspectives in our planning. By the final session, we had consolidated action plans for the first phase of assessment. The real work would begin next week, with teams deploying to each region to gather data and insights. The 18-month timeline suddenly seemed ambitious, perhaps even insufficient for the scope of change we were undertaking. On the summit's final evening, Emily hosted a dinner for the executive team. As conversations flowed around the table, she took the seat beside me. Watching you these past few days has confirmed what I already knew, she said quietly. This company needed someone like you, someone unburdened by how we've always done things. It's still going to be an uphill battle, I acknowledged, especially with some of the more established regions. Of course it will. Meaningful change always is. She studied me for a moment. You know, when we first discovered Heather's manipulation, I was concerned about how you'd handle the situation. Not because of your age, but because of your history with her. I wondered if you'd use it as an opportunity for retribution. That was never my goal. I know that now. You've consistently chosen growth over grievance, innovation over ego. That's why you're sitting here. She gestured around the table. Some of these executives have been approaching problems the same way for decades. They need someone to show them there's another path. As I looked around at my colleagues, people who had initially viewed my rapid ascension with suspicion but were now engaging with my ideas, I realized Emily was right. Perhaps my greatest contribution wouldn't be the structural changes we implemented, but the shift in mindset I represented. The rejection that had once seemed like a career setback had ultimately positioned me to impact not just a team or a region, but an entire company's approach to talent and opportunity. By denying me advancement based on an arbitrary timeline, Heather had inadvertently accelerated a transformation that might otherwise have taken years to initiate. As we concluded the summit the next day, I shared a final thought that encapsulated this journey. The greatest limitation we face isn't external. It's our willingness to accept artificial ceilings placed on our potential. When someone tells you that you're not ready, not experienced enough, or too young for an opportunity, remember, that's one person's perspective, not your destiny. Your capabilities aren't defined by your birth date, but by your mindset, your work ethic, and your willingness to challenge the status quo. The room full of leaders, ranging from recent graduates to industry veterans nearing retirement, responded with a standing ovation. At that moment, I knew we were creating something more valuable than a reorganized corporate structure. We were building a culture where talent could flourish regardless of age, where innovation wasn't constrained by tradition, and where leadership was recognized in its many forms. Project Renaissance was just beginning, but its core philosophy was already taking root. In business, as in life, the only timeline that truly matters is the one you set for yourself. 6 months into Project Renaissance, Meridian Technologies was in the midst of its most significant transformation since its founding. The assessment phase had revealed striking disparities between regions, not just in performance metrics, but in operational approaches, team structures, and cultural dynamics. The Midwest region under Craig's leadership was rigidly hierarchical but stable. The West Coast operated with more flexibility, but struggled with communication gaps between departments. The Southern region excelled at client relationships, but lagged in technological adoption. Each had strengths to preserve and weaknesses to address. My transformation team had expanded to 24 specialists drawn from across the company, a diverse group selected for their problem-solving abilities rather than their titles. We operated from a converted warehouse space near Meridian's Chicago headquarters, walls covered with flowcharts, regional data, and implementation timelines. "Blake, we have a problem with the Midwest rollout," said Zoe Carter, my deputy director. For regional implementation, she projected a data visualization onto our main screen. Craig's management team is technically complying with the new structures, but they're creating parallel systems that essentially maintain their old hierarchy. The room tensed at this update. Craig's initial support at the leadership summit had been promising, but as implementation began, his resistance had re-emerged in subtle forms. "Show me the specifics," I requested. Zoe highlighted examples, officially documenting cross-functional meetings, but making real decisions in separate, strategic sessions with only senior managers, acknowledging input from junior team members, without meaningfully incorporating it, preserving information silos through selective communication. "They're following the letter of Renaissance, but not its spirit," Zoe concluded. This wasn't entirely surprising. Change is uncomfortable, especially for those who have mastered existing systems. But Craig's approach threatened to undermine our entire initiative. If one region could appear compliant while subverting the core principles, others might follow suit. "Options?" I asked the room. Suggestions ranged from confrontational, direct intervention from Emily, to accommodating, extending the Midwest timeline. Neither felt right. Force would breed resentment, accommodation would signal weakness. "I'll handle Craig personally," I decided. "But we need to address the underlying issue. This isn't just about the Midwest. It's about demonstrating that Renaissance isn't optional window dressing. It's our new operating model." After the meeting, I called Emily to brief her. "Craig's undermining Renaissance?" "I'm disappointed but not shocked," she said. "How do you want to handle it?" "I'd like to showcase the Northeast's results more prominently. Let the numbers speak for themselves." The leadership triad I'd established there was exceeding projections across all metrics. "And I want to spend a week in the Midwest, working directly with Craig's team." Emily considered this approach. "The comparative data could help, but be careful not to shame the Midwest publicly. Craig has deep relationships with some of our largest clients." "Understood. This isn't about embarrassing anyone. It's about demonstrating what's possible when Renaissance is fully embraced." That evening, I called Josh in Boston to get his perspective. As part of the Northeast Leadership Triad, he had valuable insights into our successful implementation there. "Craig's playing the long game," Josh suggested after hearing the situation. "He's betting Renaissance will eventually be watered down, or abandoned like previous initiatives. He just needs to appear cooperative enough until then." That can't happen. Renaissance isn't just another corporate program. It's fundamental to Meridian's future competitiveness. Then you need to show him it's permanent and profitable. Craig respects two things: authority and results. The authority part is covered, with Emily's support. For results, you need a showcase he can't ignore. Josh paused. "What about the Stewart account?" The Stewart Financial Group was one of Meridian's largest national clients, with significant operations in both the Northeast and Midwest regions. They had recently expressed interest in expanding their technology integration services, an opportunity both regions were pursuing. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "Propose a joint pitch. The Northeast using our Renaissance model, the Midwest using their traditional approach. Same client, same services, two methodologies. Let Stewart compare the proposals directly and decide which approach delivers more value." It was bold, potentially risky, but compelling. A direct, real-world comparison would be difficult to dismiss. The next day, I flew to Minneapolis to meet with Craig. His office in the Midwest headquarters projected stability and tradition. Heavy, wooden furniture, awards lining the walls, photographs with clients dating back decades. "Blake," he greeted me with practiced cordiality. "To what do I owe this visit? Your team was just here last week." "That's actually why I'm here," I replied, taking the offered seat. I've been reviewing the implementation reports, and it seems Renaissance is encountering some adaptation challenges in the Midwest. Craig's expression remained neutral. We're implementing the required changes while ensuring stability for our clients. Change takes time, especially with relationships built over decades. Rather than arguing, I placed a folder on his desk. These are the latest performance comparisons across regions. The Northeast's metrics have improved significantly since adopting the Renaissance model. Efficiency up 23%, client satisfaction increased 17%, innovation metrics nearly doubled. He glanced at the data without touching the folder. The Northeast was recovering from mismanagement. Their baseline was lower, and they have a younger client portfolio more receptive to new approaches. I had anticipated this response. Which brings me to a proposal. Stewart Financial is looking to expand their technology integration services. Both your region and the Northeast are pitching for this business. And? His tone sharpened slightly. I'd like to propose a joint approach. Your team and the Northeast Triad working together, but using your respective methodologies. Stewart can evaluate both and decide which delivers superior results. Craig leaned back, studying me. You're suggesting a competition between regions? That's divisive and potentially confusing to the client. Not a competition, a collaboration. That demonstrates our range of capabilities. Stewart gets to see two approaches and can choose elements of each for their final solution. I maintained eye contact. Unless you're concerned about how your approach will compare. It was a calculated challenge to his confidence. Craig had built his reputation on client service excellence. Refusing would suggest doubt in his methods. After a long moment, he nodded. Fine. A joint pitch with parallel approaches. But I chose the Midwest team members involved. Agreed, with one condition. The teams must include junior staff from both regions, not just senior leaders. This would ensure Craig couldn't isolate his team from the Renaissance model in action. He hesitated, then extended his hand. Deal. The joint Stewart project launched the following week. I assigned Marcus from the Northeast Triad to lead their side, while Craig selected his veteran client director, Patricia Lawson. The two teams would develop separate proposals, but present them in a unified pitch to Stewart's executive committee. I returned to Chicago to manage other aspects of Renaissance, but received daily updates from Marcus. The collaboration was tense. Initially, with the Midwest team reluctant to share information freely, a reflection of their traditional siloed approach. The Northeast team, accustomed to transparency, found this frustrating but adapted. 3 weeks into the project, I received an unexpected call from Craig. We need to talk about the Stewart pitch, he said without preamble. There's a problem. What kind of problem? One of your junior analysts, Tara Chen, identified a significant gap in Stewart's current security infrastructure that neither our teams had noticed. It would require a complete redesign of our proposed solution. This sounded like positive cross-functional collaboration, not a problem. And my team originally dismissed her concerns because she's 2 years out of college. But she was right, and now we're scrambling to revise our approach with just 1 week until the presentation. I suppressed a smile at this perfect illustration of Renaissance principles in action. How can I help? I need additional resources to reconstruct our proposal. And he hesitated. I'd like Tara temporarily assigned to our team to help integrate her security framework. This was exactly the kind of cross-pollination Renaissance was designed to foster. Talent flowing to where it was needed, regardless of hierarchy or regional boundaries. Of course, I'll have Zoe arrange it immediately. After we hung up, I updated Emily on this development. She was cautiously optimistic. It's a start, but one collaborative moment doesn't mean Craig is fully converted to Renaissance. No, but it's a crack in the armor. He's experiencing firsthand how valuing contributions based on merit rather than seniority can prevent costly mistakes. The Stewart presentation took place at their Chicago headquarters the following week. I attended As an observer, curious to see how the joint approach would unfold, the Northeast team presented first, outlining their comprehensive solution developed through cross-functional collaboration. They explicitly credited contributions from team members at all levels, including acknowledging Terra's critical security insight. When the Midwest team presented, I noticed subtle but significant shifts from their typical approach. Patricia shared presentation time with 2 junior team members, something I'd never seen in previous Midwest pitches. Their solution incorporated elements of the Renaissance collaborative model, though adapted to their more formal style. Stewart's CTO, James Wilson, asked the most pointed questions. "We've worked with Meridian for years, primarily with the Midwest region. This Northeast approach seems quite different. Which methodology will actually be used if we move forward?" Craig stepped forward, a decisive moment. "Mr. Wilson, through this joint project, we've discovered that each approach has merits. The Northeast's collaborative model identified critical security considerations we might have missed. Our structured client management ensures consistent execution. What we're proposing is a hybrid approach that leverages both strengths." It was a diplomatic answer that nonetheless acknowledged the value of Renaissance principles. Stewart's executive team appeared impressed, asking for a formal proposal incorporating this hybrid model. After the successful presentation, Craig surprised me by suggesting we discuss the implications over dinner. At an upscale steakhouse overlooking the Chicago River, he was more candid than I'd ever seen him. "I still believe in the value of experience," he said after our first course arrived. 22 years in this industry has taught me things that can't be learned from data alone." "I've never disputed that," I replied. "Renaissance isn't about dismissing experience. It's about ensuring all valuable input is heard, regardless of its source." He nodded slowly. "When Terra identified that security vulnerability, my first instinct was to dismiss it because of her limited experience. If we hadn't been working in this joint model, we would have presented a fundamentally flawed solution to a 20-year client relationship. This admission represented significant progress. That's exactly why Renaissance matters. No one person, not me, not you, not even Emily, has a monopoly on good ideas." Craig considered this. "I'm still not convinced every aspect of Renaissance makes sense for the Midwest. Our client relationships are built on stability and consistency. Then adapt it. Renaissance isn't about forcing identical structures everywhere. It's about core principles: transparency, collaborative decision-making, recognizing talent wherever it exists. How those principles manifest can vary based on regional needs." This nuanced approach seemed to resonate with him. "So, you're not expecting us to dismantle our entire operational model overnight?" "No. I'm expecting meaningful implementation of the principles, with reasonable adaptation for your specific context." I leaned forward. "But the parallel systems and surface-level compliance need to stop. That undermines the entire initiative." By the end of dinner, we'd reached a genuine understanding. Craig would commit to authentic Renaissance implementation, with some flexibility in how certain elements were applied. In return, I would ensure his region received the support and resources needed for a successful transition. 2 days later, Stewart Financial announced they were expanding their contract with Meridian, specifically requesting the hybrid approach demonstrated in the presentation. It was a significant win, financially valuable, and a powerful proof point for Renaissance. At our next national leadership meeting, Craig surprised everyone by volunteering in the Midwest region to pilot a new cross-regional talent exchange program, where team members would temporarily work in different regions to share best practices. Coming from Renaissance's most prominent skeptic, this endorsement carried special weight. After the meeting, Emily pulled me aside. "Whatever you said to Craig, it worked. He's actually championing aspects of Renaissance now. I think the Stewart project showed him that this isn't about age versus experience or tradition versus innovation. It's about creating systems where the best ideas win, regardless of their source. Emily smiled. You've come a long way from being told you weren't ready for leadership because of your age. The comment triggered a realization. In focusing on implementing Renaissance across Meridian, I hadn't fully appreciated how much my own perspective had evolved. I was no longer the ambitious young executive fighting to prove my worth despite my age. I had become a leader focused on creating systems where others wouldn't face the same arbitrary limitations. The next phase of Project Renaissance focused on scaling successful regional innovations company-wide. We created a digital platform where teams could share implementation challenges and solutions, breaking down geographical silos that had limited cross-regional learning. One feature of this platform was Renaissance Champions, profiles highlighting team members whose ideas had significantly impacted their regions. One of the first features was Tara Chen, whose security insight had not only saved the Stewart project, but had since been implemented across all client security protocols. 6 months later, as we approached the 1-year mark of Project Renaissance, Emily called me into her office for what I assumed was a routine progress review. Instead, she had unexpected news. The board is creating a new position, Chief Transformation Officer. They want to make Renaissance permanent, not just a one-time reorganization, but an ongoing evolution of how Meridian operates in a changing business landscape. She smiled. They want you for the role. The offer was flattering, but raised immediate questions. What about my current responsibilities? We're only halfway through the Renaissance implementation. Your deputy directors are ready to step up. Zoe, in particular, has demonstrated she can lead the execution phase. Emily handed me a folder containing the position description. This role is about the future, ensuring Meridian continues to evolve rather than calcifying into new rigid structures. As I reviewed the details, I recognized this was another pivotal moment in my career trajectory. From team lead to regional, VP to EVP, and now potentially to C-suite at just 28 years old. Each step had come not through patient adherence to traditional timelines, but through demonstrating impact and challenging conventional limitations. I'd like to propose some modifications to the role, I said after reading the description. Emily raised an eyebrow. Such as? I want to establish a transformation council with representatives from all levels of the organization, not just executive. Leadership. And I want to implement a rotation program where promising talent from any department can join transformation initiatives on temporary assignments. These changes would ensure the new department didn't become an isolated think tank, but remained connected to ground-level realities across Meridian. Emily considered the proposals. The board will support this approach. They've seen how the distributed expertise model has accelerated innovation. She smiled. This is exactly why they want you in this role. You're always thinking about systems rather than hierarchies. As I left her office, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. What had begun as a personal setback, being told I was too young for advancement, had catalyzed not just my own career evolution, but a fundamental reimagining of how Meridian identified and developed talent. That evening, I found myself walking along the Chicago lakefront, the same path where I'd contemplated the EVP offer a year earlier. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Heather Marshall had been appointed CEO of a smaller tech firm on the West Coast. Despite everything, I found myself hoping she had learned from her time at Meridian, that she would create opportunities based on capability rather than calendar. As the sun set over the lake, I composed an email accepting the Chief Transformation Officer position, with my proposed modifications. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew the principles that would guide my approach, valuing merit over tradition, collaboration over hierarchy, and recognizing that innovation can come from anywhere, especially from those who don't fit conventional expectations. The rejection that had once seemed like an insurmountable obstacle had ultimately revealed a much greater opportunity, not just to advance my own career, but to transform an entire company's understanding of what leadership could look like. Sometimes being told no is the beginning of creating something far better than you initially imagined. The first year as Meridian's Chief Transformation Officer flew by in a whirlwind of strategic initiatives. Project Renaissance had evolved from a one-time reorganization into an ongoing philosophy embedded in our corporate DNA. The Transformation Council I'd established, featuring voices from every level and department, had become a powerful engine for continuous innovation. At 29, I was the youngest C-suite executive in Meridian's history, and, according to industry publications, among the youngest in our sector nationwide. The novelty of my age had faded as results spoke for themselves. Meridian's market share had grown 14% since Renaissance began. Employee satisfaction scores had reached record highs, and our ability to adapt to market shifts had dramatically improved. My office on the top floor of Meridian headquarters offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, a far cry from the cubicle where I'd started just 5 years earlier. But the most significant changes weren't in my surroundings, but in Meridian's culture. Cross-functional collaboration had become the norm rather than the exception. Ideas were evaluated on merit rather than source. Talent development was proactive rather than seniority-based. On a crisp autumn morning, Emily called an unexpected meeting of the executive leadership team. As we gathered in the boardroom, her expression was uncharacteristically tense. "I've received a confidential acquisition offer," she announced once the doors were closed. TechCore is proposing a full buyout at 30% above our current market valuation. The room fell silent. TechCore was our largest competitor, known for aggressive expansion through acquisition. They had a reputation for dismantling acquired companies, retaining select talent and clients while discarding the rest. "Their offer is compelling from a shareholder perspective," Emily continued. "The board is divided. Some view it as a prime opportunity to maximize value. Others are concerned about TechCore's post-acquisition practices." Kevin Parker, our CFO, voiced what many were thinking. "Their track record is clear. They'll strip Meridian for parts. The Renaissance culture we've built will be the first casualty." Emily nodded. "Which is why I wanted this group's input before responding to the board. A formal offer will be presented at next week's meeting. We need a united position." The discussion that followed revealed deep concerns. While the financial terms were attractive, most executives believed Meridian's independent future was brighter than what TechCore would offer. Renaissance had positioned us for long-term growth that might surpass the immediate premium TechCore was offering. "They're not buying us because they value what we've built," I pointed out. "They're buying us because they see our transformation as a competitive threat. We're winning clients and talent with our approach." Emily turned to me. "Blake, I'd like you to prepare a comprehensive analysis comparing our projected 5-year performance as an independent company versus the acquisition offer. The board needs data to support whichever direction we recommend." This assignment was critical. The fate of everything we'd built through the Renaissance, all the cultural shifts, operational improvements, and talent development systems, hung in the balance. If TechCore acquired us, those innovations would likely be dismantled in favor of their more traditional hierarchical approach. I assembled a special task force from my transformation team, bringing in financial analysts, market strategists, and organizational psychologists to build a multidimensional projection. We worked around the clock for 5 days, analyzing market trends, client retention patterns, innovation metrics, and talent development outcomes. The picture that emerged was compelling. While TechCore's offer provided an immediate value boost, our Renaissance-driven trajectory showed potential for significantly greater returns over the 5-year horizon. Most importantly, this growth was sustainable rather than extractive. On the day before the board meeting, I presented our findings to Emily and the executive team. The data supported what we intuitively believed: Meridian's independent path. offered superior long-term value for shareholders, employees, and clients. This is precisely what we needed, Emily said, reviewing our analysis. But TechCore will counter with their own projections showing synergies and market advantages from the acquisition. Which is why we included this, I replied, revealing our final section. We had conducted a detailed analysis of TechCore's previous acquisitions, tracking what happened to shareholder value, client retention, and employee satisfaction after their takeovers. The pattern was clear and concerning. Short-term gains followed by longer-term deterioration, as innovative cultures were homogenized into TechCore's rigid structure. Emily spent that evening preparing for the board presentation, incorporating our analysis into her recommendation against the acquisition. The next morning, as the board convened, the executive team waited tensely in a nearby conference room. Hours passed without updates. Whatever discussion was happening in the boardroom was clearly complex and contested. Finally, around 4 p.m., Emily texted me, "Need you in the boardroom. Now." When I entered, the atmosphere was charged. Board members sat around the massive table, with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Emily stood at the head, looking simultaneously exhausted and determined. "Blake, the board has questions about your Renaissance projections that I believe you're best positioned to address," she explained. Patricia Winters, still the board chair, fixed me with a penetrating gaze. "Mr. Turner, your analysis suggests Renaissance innovations will generate sustained competitive advantages that outperform TechCore's acquisition premium. That's a bold claim, considering the transformation is still relatively new." I understood the subtext. Some board members likely viewed Renaissance as my pet project, rather than a fundamental business advantage. I needed to make the case with concrete evidence rather than philosophical arguments about corporate culture. "Ms. Winters, while the complete Renaissance implementation is still evolving, we already have substantial data demonstrating its impact," I began. I presented 3 case studies, specifically chosen to resonate with the board's financial focus. First, the Stewart Financial expansion, where our collaborative approach had not only won the contract, but expanded its scope by 40%. Second, our talent retention metrics, showing how Renaissance had reduced turnover among high-performing employees by 62%, generating millions in saved recruitment and training costs. Third, our product development timeline, which had shortened by 35% through cross-functional collaboration. These aren't speculative benefits, I concluded. They're measurable advantages already flowing to our bottom line. TechCore's offer reflects these improvements. They're essentially paying a premium for the very culture they would subsequently dismantle. The questioning that followed was rigorous but fair. Several board members who had initially favored the acquisition began visibly reconsidering as our evidence mounted. Others remained skeptical, focused on the certainty of TechCore's offer versus the potential of our independent path. After answering their questions for nearly an hour, I was dismissed to rejoin the executive team. We waited another tense hour before Emily finally emerged from the boardroom. "They've rejected TechCore's offer," she announced, immediately triggering relieved exclamations around the room. "But there's more. The board wants to accelerate Renaissance innovations as our primary competitive strategy. Blake, they've authorized an expanded budget for your department and expedited approval processes for your initiatives. This was more than just dodging an acquisition. It was a full endorsement of the transformation approach we'd been championing. The board was betting on Renaissance as Meridian's path forward." In the weeks that followed, news of Meridian's rejection of TechCore's premium offer generated significant industry discussion. Some analysts questioned turning down such favorable terms. Others recognized it as a statement of confidence in our independent direction. This external attention brought unexpected opportunities. Companies interested in our transformation approach began reaching out, seeking insights they could apply to their own organizations. What had begun as an internal initiative was evolving into a thought leadership position within the broader industry. After discussing with Emily, we decided to leverage this interest strategically. I would represent Meridian at selected industry conferences, sharing Renaissance principles while carefully protecting our proprietary methodologies. This would position Meridian as an innovation leader, while potentially influencing industry practices in a direction that aligned with our approach. My first major speaking engagement was at the National Tech Leadership Conference in San Francisco. Ironically, the same city where Heather Marshall had taken her CEO position. The conference organizers had requested a presentation on organizational transformation in the digital age, with particular interest in how Renaissance had changed Meridian's culture and performance. The ballroom was packed when I took the stage, with hundreds of executives, consultants, and industry analysts eager to understand our approach. As I began my presentation, I noticed a familiar face in the third row, Heather Marshall herself, watching with undisguised curiosity. Rather than being unsettled by her presence, I felt a strange sense of completion. The person who had once judged me unprepared for leadership was now in the audience as I shared insights from the C-suite position that her rejection had, paradoxically, helped me reach. My presentation focused on Renaissance's core principles: distributed expertise, transparent decision-making, and merit-based advancement. I shared specific examples of how these principles had transformed Meridian's operations, carefully balancing transparency with discretion about our proprietary methods. The Q&A session that followed was lively, with attendees particularly interested in how we'd overcome resistance to change. I answered candidly, sharing stories of initial skepticism from leaders like Craig and how demonstrating results had ultimately won them over. As the session concluded and attendees gathered around for individual questions, I was surprised to see Heather approaching the stage. We hadn't spoken since her desperate attempts to discredit me during the financial manipulation scandal. "Blake," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "Impressive presentation." "Thank you," I replied, maintaining professional courtesy. "How are things at Visionary Tech?" Her new company had been making modest waves in the industry, challenging but rewarding. She seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "Your Renaissance approach is interesting. Some elements might be applicable even in a smaller organization like ours." The comment surprised me. I had expected defensiveness or dismissal, not interest in our methods. The core principles can be adapted to various scales. It's more about the mindset than the specific structures. She nodded thoughtfully. "I've been following Meridian's progress. Your rejection of TechCore's offer was bold. It reflected confidence in our direction. Sometimes the most valuable path isn't the most immediately lucrative one." A subtle expression crossed her face, something like recognition, perhaps even regret. "I've had occasion to reflect on my time at Meridian, particularly certain personnel decisions." This was as close to an acknowledgement of her misjudgment as I was likely to get. I decided to respond with generosity rather than vindication. "Leadership is a continuous learning process. I've certainly made my share of mistakes along the way. But not the mistake of underestimating talent based on arbitrary factors," she observed. After a brief pause, she extended her hand. "Congratulations on your success, Blake. It appears I was wrong about your readiness for responsibility." The admission, however belated, represented a satisfying closure to that chapter. As we shook hands, I realized we had both been transformed by the events set in motion by her rejection, me into a more influential leader than I might otherwise have become, and her, perhaps into a more thoughtful evaluator of talent. The exchange with Heather was a powerful reminder of how far I'd come, but the conference also highlighted how much work remained ahead. As other companies began adopting elements of the Renaissance approach, maintaining Meridian's competitive advantage would require continuous innovation rather than resting on our existing achievements. Upon returning to Chicago, I convened the Transformation Council to begin planning our next evolution. Renaissance has succeeded in breaking down internal barriers, I told the diverse group. Now we need to extend that thinking to our external relationships, how we collaborate with clients, partners, and even competitors. This concept of extended ecosystem transformation became our next major initiative. Rather than viewing Meridian as a self-contained entity, we began redesigning our operations to function as part of an interconnected network. Client relationships evolved from transactional to collaborative co-creation. Partner arrangements became more fluid and adaptive. Even competitor interactions shifted toward selective cooperation on industry-wide challenges. 6 months into this new phase, Emily called me into her office for what had become our regular strategic review. But today's agenda was clearly different. She seemed simultaneously energized and somewhat hesitant. "Blake, I've been contemplating a significant transition," she began. "I've led Meridian for 11 years now. The company is in a strong position, Renaissance is firmly established, and our market trajectory is positive. I'm considering retirement within the next 18 months. The news was unexpected but not shocking. Emily was in her early 60s and had occasionally mentioned wanting to pursue other interests. Still, her leadership had been so fundamental to Meridian that imagining the company without her was difficult. The board and I have been discussing succession planning," she continued. "Your name features prominently in those conversations." I sat straighter, processing the implication. "For CEO? Emily, I'm 30. That's unprecedented even in the tech sector." She smiled. "5 years ago, you were too young to be an operations director. Now you're a successful C-suite executive who's reshaped our entire company. Age seems an increasingly irrelevant metric for your capabilities." The possibility was both exhilarating and sobering. Leading Meridian's transformation efforts was one thing. Taking responsibility for the entire organization was another magnitude entirely. "This isn't an immediate decision," Emily assured me. "I'm sharing this now so you can consider whether this path interests you, and so we can begin intentional preparation if it does. The board would want to see you gain additional experience in certain areas, particularly client relationship, management, and investor communications." I appreciated her directness and long-term thinking. "I'm honored to be considered. I'd need time to reflect on whether this is the right next step." "Of course. Think of the next year as an exploration period. I'll create opportunities for you to develop in those additional areas without making any formal announcements about succession." That evening, I found myself again walking along Chicago's lakefront, a path that had become my thinking space for major decisions. The CEO consideration was unexpected, yet somehow felt like the natural progression of a journey that began with Heather's rejection years ago. Each step, from team lead to regional VP to EVP to CTO, had seemed premature by traditional standards. Each had stretched my capabilities and forced rapid growth. Each had ultimately validated that capability rather than calendar was the better measure of readiness. The CEO role would represent the ultimate test of this philosophy. If I succeeded, it would definitively demonstrate that artificial age-based limitations deserve to be discarded. If I struggled, it might reinforce traditional career timelines. As I contemplated this potential future, my phone buzzed with a message from Josh, who had recently been promoted to head the entire Northeast region as the leadership triad evolved. "Heard rumors about Emily's retirement planning. You're the obvious successor. Ready to become the youngest CEO in the industry?" His confidence was heartening, but I knew this decision required careful consideration rather than ego gratification. The CEO role wasn't just another promotion, it would mean responsibility for thousands of employees and their families, accountability to shareholders, and stewardship of Meridian's future direction. I texted back, "Nothing decided yet. Still processing the possibility, would want your honest perspective before making any decisions." His reply came quickly. "You know my take. Age hasn't limited your impact so far. Why start believing in artificial ceilings now? Josh's question crystallized my thinking. Throughout this journey, my success had come not from adhering to traditional timelines, but from rejecting arbitrary limitations. First those imposed by others, then increasingly those I might have placed on myself. The CEO role wasn't about achieving some career milestone ahead of schedule. It was about continuing to demonstrate that leadership effectiveness stemmed from capability, vision, and execution, not from accumulating years. As the Chicago skyline lit up against the darkening sky, I made my decision. I would pursue this opportunity not to prove anything about my age, but because I genuinely believed I could lead Meridian effectively in its next chapter. The company's transformation journey had become intertwined with my own, each shaping the other in unexpected ways. The path from rejected promotion candidate to potential CEO had been neither straight nor predictable. Yet each obstacle had ultimately revealed new possibilities that might have remained undiscovered on a more conventional trajectory. Heather's dismissive words, "You'll never be ready for this level of responsibility," had long since lost their sting. Instead, they have become a reminder that readiness isn't determined by external validation, but by internal capability and the courage to step forward when opportunity appears. Whatever came next, whether the CEO role or some as yet unimagined opportunity, I would approach it with the philosophy that had guided me since that pivotal rejection. Artificial limitations deserve to be challenged. Capability trumps convention, and sometimes the most valuable paths forward are revealed only when traditional routes are blocked. The next morning, I messaged Emily. "I'm interested in exploring the CEO path. Let's discuss development areas and transition planning." Her response was immediate and characteristic in its directness. "I thought you might be." First assignment. Join me for the quarterly investor call next week. Time to introduce you to the people who own this company. The future starts now, and so it did. Not because I had dutifully waited my turn, but because I had consistently demonstrated that traditional waiting periods were often unnecessary constraints on potential. The journey from rejected promotion to company leadership has taught me that sometimes the most valuable qualification is the willingness to step forward before conventional wisdom deems you ready. The 18 months of Emily's transition plan unfolded as a masterclass in leadership. Preparation. She systematically exposed me to aspects of the CEO role I hadn't previously encountered: investor relations, board dynamics, strategic partnerships, and regulatory navigation. Each new domain stretched my capabilities while reinforcing Emily's confidence in my potential. My first quarterly investor call had been a baptism by fire. Wall Street analysts were notoriously skeptical of Meridian's Renaissance-driven strategy, especially after we'd rejected TechCore's premium acquisition offer. Their questions were pointed, occasionally hostile, and designed to expose any weakness in our long-term vision. "Mr. Turner," one analyst had begun, not bothering to hide his skepticism, "you're advocating for organizational approaches that contradict decades of established management practice. What makes you confident these experimental methods won't ultimately destroy shareholder value?" Rather than becoming defensive, I'd leaned into the challenge. Renaissance isn't experimental, it's responsive. Traditional management hierarchies evolved for industrial-era challenges. Today's digital marketplace requires adaptive organizations where information flows freely and decisions happen at the point of maximum insight rather than the top of an org chart. Our financial results demonstrate this isn't theoretical, it's driving tangible value creation. Over subsequent quarters, as Meridian's performance consistently vindicated our approach, these interactions evolved from confrontational to genuinely curious. The market was beginning to recognize that our transformation wasn't just cultural window dressing, but a fundamental competitive advantage. Behind the scenes, Emily was methodically transferring key relationships, introducing me to major clients, industry partners, and regulatory officials as her potential successor. These introductions were handled with characteristic subtlety. She never explicitly identified me as the next CEO, presenting me instead as a key strategic leader whose perspective would be valuable. Blake understands where Meridian is going because he's been instrumental in designing that future, she would say, creating space for me to demonstrate my vision directly. The board's quarterly reviews of my development were rigorous, but increasingly positive. Executive search firms had presented external candidates for consideration, but as the transition timeline progressed, the director's questions shifted from whether I was ready to how we would execute a smooth handover. Throughout this preparation period, I continued leading Meridian's transformation initiatives, now focused on our extended ecosystem strategy. This approach had generated innovative client partnerships that blurred traditional boundaries between service provider and customer. Several of these arrangements had become showcase examples of industry evolution, further cementing Meridian's thought leadership position. One particularly significant initiative was our Collaborative Innovation Labs, physical and virtual spaces where Meridian staff worked alongside client teams on joint challenges. These labs had originated from my observation that the most valuable insights often emerged at the intersection of internal and external perspectives. The flagship lab in Chicago had become something of an industry landmark, hosting delegations from companies worldwide seeking to understand our methodology. The Renaissance principles that had begun as internal operational changes had evolved into a marketable approach that differentiated Meridian in an increasingly commoditized technology services landscape. As the formal CEO announcement approached, Emily and I were reviewing transition details in her office when my phone buzzed with an unexpected news alert. TechCore's stock had plummeted 27% following a disastrous quarterly report. Their aggressive acquisition strategy had created integration problems, with several acquired companies experiencing mass talent departures and client defections. Emily glanced at the headline over my shoulder. "Vindication," she said simply. The board made the right call rejecting their offer. They're acquiring structures without understanding the cultures that make them effective, I observed. It's like buying a high-performance engine without realizing it requires special fuel, an apt metaphor, and one that reinforces the importance of your succession. She closed her laptop decisively. It's time to finalize the announcement timeline. The board is ready. The official press release went out on a Monday morning. Meridian Technologies announces CEO transition. Emily would step down after 12 years of leadership, with me named as her successor effective in 60 days. The announcement emphasized continuity of strategic direction, while highlighting my role in developing the Renaissance approach that had transformed the company. Industry reaction was predictably mixed. Many outlets focused on my age. 30-year-old wunderkind to lead tech giant was a typical headline. Financial analysts questioned whether I had sufficient breadth of experience for the role. Competitors subtly suggested to our clients that Meridian was taking an unjustified risk. We had anticipated these reactions and prepared accordingly. A carefully orchestrated series of interviews and media appearances allowed me to demonstrate the depth of my strategic thinking and familiarity with all aspects of Meridian's operations. Emily participated in several joint conversations, explicitly endorsing my readiness and the thorough succession planning process. Behind the scenes, I was engaged in hundreds of conversations with employees at all levels, key clients, investors, and industry partners. These weren't damage control, but relationship building, ensuring critical stakeholders felt heard and respected during the transition. The most meaningful conversation came during a private dinner with the Northeast leadership, Triad, Marcus, Alicia, and Josh, who had flown to Chicago to celebrate the announcement. These three had been with me since the beginning of the Renaissance journey, each evolving into exceptional leaders in their own right. From being denied promotion to CEO in 5 years, Josh marveled as we shared drinks at a rooftop restaurant, overlooking the city. "If Heather could see you now," She probably has, Marcus pointed out. This announcement is everywhere in the industry. Alicia, always the most perceptive about underlying dynamics, studied me thoughtfully. How does it feel? Not just the promotion, but having your entire approach to leadership validated at this scale? It was a profound question that cut through the superficial aspects of the transition. It feels like responsibility more than validation, I answered after consideration. Renaissance works not because of any brilliance on my part, but because it taps into fundamental human potential that traditional structures suppress. As CEO, my job will be ensuring we don't gradually recreate the limitations we've worked to eliminate. That's why you'll succeed where other transformation efforts fail, Alicia noted. You see this as ongoing evolution rather than a fixed destination. Josh raised his glass. To Blake Turner, the living proof that potential isn't defined by calendar years. As their glasses clinked against mine, I felt profound gratitude for these colleagues who had become friends. Their support had been crucial throughout this journey, from the initial rejection that could have derailed my career to this pinnacle achievement that few would have predicted. The former CEO transition ceremony took place in Meridian's Chicago headquarters atrium, with employees attending both in person and via livestream from offices worldwide. The board chair, Patricia Winters, still serving after all these years, delivered remarks highlighting Meridian's evolution under Emily's leadership and the strategic continuity the succession represented. When Emily took the podium, her typically composed demeanor showed rare emotion. Leadership transitions are defining moments for organizations, she began. They reveal whether a company's success depends on individual personalities or enduring principles. I'm profoundly confident that Meridian's future is secure not because Blake Turner is exceptional, though he certainly is, but because together we've built systems that identify, develop, and empower exceptional talent wherever it exists in our organization. She turned toward me. 5 years ago, Blake joined headquarters as part of a talent development initiative, having been told elsewhere that his age made him not ready for advanced leadership. That misguided judgment represents exactly the kind of artificial limitation Renaissance was designed to eliminate. His journey from that rejection to this podium isn't just a personal triumph. It's validation of our entire organizational philosophy. As I stepped forward to accept the ceremonial leadership token, a small crystal sculpture representing Meridian's logo. The applause was thunderous. Looking out across the atrium filled with colleagues and the screens showing teams from across the global organization, I felt the weight of their expectations and trust. Thank you, Emily, for your extraordinary leadership and even more extraordinary mentorship, I began. And thank you to everyone throughout Meridian who has contributed to our transformation journey. I deliberately avoided prepared remarks, choosing instead to speak directly from my experience. When I was told I wasn't ready for leadership because of my age, it would have been easy to accept that judgment. To believe that readiness comes only through accumulated years rather than demonstrated capability. But that moment of rejection ultimately revealed a more significant truth. The most valuable paths often become visible only when conventional routes are blocked. The room was silent now, attendees listening intently. Renaissance began as an operational transformation, but its most profound impact has been cultural, creating an environment where artificial limitations are challenged, where ideas are valued based on merit rather than source, and where leadership is recognized as a capability rather than a position. I gestured toward the global office screens. As CEO, my commitment is to preserve and extend this culture, not as a static achievement, but as an evolving practice. The methods that brought us here won't be sufficient for where we're going. We'll need to continuously reinvent ourselves, challenging comfortable assumptions and embracing new perspectives. The speech continued with specific strategic commitments and recognition of key contributors, but its essential message was consistent. Meridian's future would be defined by our capacity for ongoing transformation rather than rigid adherence to past success formulas, even those we had created ourselves. The 60-day transition period passed quickly, filled with knowledge transfer sessions, stakeholder meetings, and strategic planning. Emily was extraordinarily generous with her insights, sharing not just what she had done as CEO, but why, including the mistakes and course corrections that had shaped her leadership approach. The hardest lesson for new CEOs, she told me during one of our final sessions, is understanding the difference between urgency and importance. Everything will feel urgent: the market movements, competitor actions, internal issues. But reacting to urgency often means neglecting importance. Your job is maintaining focus on what truly matters amid constant pressure to address what merely seems immediate. On my first official day as CEO, I arrived at headquarters before dawn. The building was quiet, executives and staff not due for hours yet. I wanted time to reflect before the whirlwind began. Standing in my new office, Emily's former space, now redecorated in a more collaborative layout with a conference table, replacing the traditional executive desk, I felt both the culmination of one journey and the beginning of another. On the credenza behind where I would sit during meetings, I'd placed a small memento: the rejection email from Heather declining my application for the operations director position years ago. Printed and framed, it served not as a trophy of vindication, but as a reminder that limitations others place on us are often projections of their own constraints, rather than accurate assessments of our potential. By 7:30 a.m., the executive team had begun arriving for our first official meeting under my leadership. This group had evolved significantly during the transition planning. Some long-standing members had chosen to retire alongside Emily, while others had been promoted from within, including Zoe from my transformation team, who now served as Chief Innovation Officer. The meeting agenda reflected my leadership priorities. First, a comprehensive review of our talent development pipeline across all regions and departments. Second, updates on our most innovative client partnerships. And finally, a strategic discussion about emerging opportunities at the intersection of technology and human systems, the space where Meridian had established its distinctive expertise. Before we begin the formal agenda, I said once everyone was seated, I want to establish a foundational principle for our work together. We've all witnessed leadership transitions where the new CEO immediately puts their stamp on the organization through dramatic changes, new strategies, restructuring, or visible breaks with previous approaches. Heads nodded around the table, several executives having experienced exactly such transitions at other companies. That won't be happening here, I continued. Not because our current direction lacks areas for improvement, but because substantive evolution happens through thoughtful iteration, rather than performative disruption. The Renaissance principles that brought us here remain our compass, even as their specific expression continues to evolve. This set the tone for not just the meeting, but my leadership approach. The day unfolded with a careful balance of continuity and fresh perspective, respecting established strengths while creating space for new possibilities. By evening, when I finally headed home, I had conducted 17 meetings, spoken with key clients in 3 countries, addressed the entire company via video, and conducted my first press interviews as CEO. The following weeks established patterns that would define my leadership tenure. I maintained direct involvement with innovation initiatives while building a trustworthy executive team that could manage operational fundamentals. I preserved Emily's practice of regular, unstructured conversations with employees at all levels while adding new forums for cross-functional ideation. I honored relationships with long-standing clients while actively pursuing opportunities in emerging sectors. 3 months into my CEO role, an unexpected opportunity arose that would test these balanced priorities. Sandra Mitchell, founder and CEO of Quantum Dynamics, a pioneering quantum computing startup with revolutionary technology but limited commercial traction, approached me about a potential strategic partnership. Their technical capabilities perfectly complemented Meridian's enterprise expertise, but integrating such radically different organizations would present enormous challenges. This isn't a traditional acquisition target, I explained to the board during our emergency session. It's a capability accelerator. Quantum computing will transform our industry within 5 years. Most companies are taking wait-and-see approaches. This partnership would position Meridian at the forefront of that transformation. The board's questions were insightful and challenging. How would we integrate Quantum's research-oriented culture with our service delivery model? How would we justify the premium investment to shareholders? How would we retain Quantum's specialized talent through the transition? These are precisely the challenges Renaissance was designed to address, I responded. Not by imposing our model on them, but by creating adaptive interfaces between different organizational systems. We've been perfecting this approach with our client partnership labs. Quantum would be an extension of that philosophy. After extensive discussion, the board approved pursuing the partnership with specific performance parameters. The subsequent negotiation process was intense but productive, resulting in a structure where Quantum would maintain operational independence while integrating with Meridian's client delivery systems through specialized cross-functional teams. When we announced the partnership 6 weeks later, industry reaction was immediate and primarily positive. Analysts recognized the strategic vision behind combining Meridian's enterprise capabilities with Quantum's technological innovation. Our stock price jumped 14% in 2 days as investors absorbed the long-term implications. This successful integration served as a blueprint for subsequent partnerships, each extending Meridian's capabilities in targeted directions. Rather than pursuing growth through traditional expansion or conventional acquisitions, we developed an ecosystem model where complementary organizations could maintain their distinctive strengths while creating mutual value through structured collaboration. 1 year into my CEO tenure at Meridian's annual leadership summit, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. Executives and high-potential leaders from across the global organization had gathered in Chicago to align on strategic direction and strengthen cross-functional relationships. 5 years ago, I told the assembled group during my keynote address, I was told I wasn't ready for a director-level position because at 26, I was too young for that level of responsibility. That moment could have defined my career in either of 2 ways: by accepting that artificial limitation, or by recognizing it as a flawed judgment based on outdated assumptions. The room was silent, leaders from across generations and backgrounds, listening attentively. What made the difference wasn't some exceptional quality on my part, but finding an environment, created by leaders like Emily, where capability mattered more than convention, where demonstrated results outweighed arbitrary prerequisites, where potential wasn't confined to predetermined paths. I gestured to the diverse group before me. Look around this room. Some of you began your careers decades ago. Others joined Meridian straight from university. Some rose through traditional advancement tracks. Others have taken unique journeys across disciplines and functions. This diversity of experience is our greatest strength, but only if we continue creating systems where artificial limitations are challenged rather than reinforced. The evolution of Meridian under my leadership would continue. New challenges emerged, market dynamics shifted, technologies transformed. But through it all, the core philosophy remained consistent. Human potential flourishes when arbitrary limitations are removed, when merit outweighs convention, and when organizations value demonstrated capability over predetermined qualifications. As for Heather Marshall, our paths crossed occasionally at industry events. Her company, Visionary Tech, had adopted elements of the Renaissance approach with moderate success. While never explicitly acknowledging how profoundly she had misjudged my potential, she had evidently learned from the experience. Her leadership team now included several notably young executives in significant roles. The framed rejection email remained in my credenza, not as a monument to overcoming a single person's misjudgment, but as a reminder of a universal truth I shared whenever mentoring emerging leaders. The moments when others underestimate you are often the greatest opportunities to discover what you're truly capable of achieving. The path from that rejection to the CEO's office hadn't been linear or predictable. It had been shaped by unexpected challenges, strategic relationships, and the courage to step forward when opportunity appeared, often before conventional wisdom deemed me ready. Each obstacle had revealed new possibilities that might have remained undiscovered on a more traditional trajectory. Looking toward Meridian's future from my office overlooking Chicago's vibrant skyline, I felt profound gratitude for that initial rejection. Without Heather's dismissive words, "You'll never be ready for this level of responsibility," I might never have found my way to Emily, to Renaissance, to the transformation journey that had not only defined my career, but reshaped an entire organization's understanding of human potential. Sometimes the greatest opportunities emerge precisely when traditional paths are blocked. Sometimes rejection is merely redirection to something far better than we initially imagined. And sometimes the people who underestimate us become the unwitting catalysts for our greatest achievements. Looking for more? We've got two amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.